who are we? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to talk about? Who are we trying to talk to? These are some of the swirling questions in my head. So I thought that it would be a good idea to take this video to really describe as I'm kind of fleshing out what I want this channel to be. And that's part of the challenge that I'm in right now, literally challenge, not I'm an internal challenge, but I'm actually putting myself in a YouTube challenge so that I get out of my head and I start just working some of this stuff out. Sometimes when you're stuck in something, it just needs to be metabolized. It just needs to, you need to put some action to it. You need to start little by little, figuring out what it is exactly you want to do. So that's what we're doing here during this challenge. And so I appreciate you sticking around for that. But I have found, just like all the advice says, really think about your ideal client in a way that maybe they represent a client that you've had in the past. And you can give them a new name and you can kind of describe them so that you're not actually calling out your ideal client. And I will say that I have gone through this exercise, but what has been even more helpful for me recently, and that's what this is going to be about, is actually looking at the string of clients that I've had and drawing from each of them. I can think of multiple clients where I'm like, okay, what was the common thread? What was the thing that really made me love working with all of these people in whatever capacity? Maybe it was a coworker, a past coworker. Maybe it was somebody who I have personally coached. Maybe it was somebody in a class that I took, etc. So it doesn't really matter. But what was the thread? What were the themes that I noticed about the people that I'm continually drawn to? So, first of all, I know for a long time I was saying leaders, achievers, and up and comers. And I think that is true, except the idea that the people I love to work with, they don't always recognize that they're a leader. So, if I say that word, they automatically disqualify themselves, which drives me crazy, but we're getting there. And so I recognized if I were to say, "Oh, I speak to leaders, achievers, and up and comers," I felt like it just wasn't really hitting the mark. It was not drawing in the people who I would envision, because most of the time the people just don't even identify as a leader. Okay, so there's that. So then I kind of took that version of what I was thinking and iterated it a bit and came up with version number two, which is this idea of overachievers, people pleasers, and wannabe leaders. I thought that was like more encompassing. That was a little bit more defining. That was a little bit more, those are my people. If they would say, they would have the courage to say, "Oh, I'm definitely an overachiever," or "I'm a people pleaser," or "I'm a wannabe," wannabe leader, wannabe manager, wannabe fill in the blank, like whatever quote unquote role they want to be in, they would identify with that language. So I feel like that absolutely is, something that very much describes who it is that I want to work with. Someone who would actively, unapologetically call themselves either an overachiever, a people pleaser, or a wannabe leader. Because the other thing about those two words that I love, overachiever and people pleaser, is that it really gives us this idea that on one side we have the overachiever, on the other side we have the people pleaser, but the truth is they have so much in common, that middle ground of what those people have in common, it's just expressed differently. But what they have in common is very much the same. And that common ground is really what I want to get to in some form or fashion eventually. So that's another way that I said it. Another way I would like to say, or maybe like another attribute, I guess, of who I want to work with are people who are in either the middle of or the beginning stages of a transition in their life. And I have a huge story that goes along with this idea of transition, but about 8 years ago, that word really just kind of gripped onto me. I don't know if you've ever had that happen to you before, where there's something where it attached itself to you and you're like, this will be with me the rest of my life. The word transition for me is that, and it has to do with childbirth, actually. So I'll go into the story later. But the bottom line is that people who are at the beginning stages, where most of the time they don't even recognize that they're in this kind of ramp up of a transition. How they often identify it is there's usually like an unsettledness that's coming about within them, or maybe even a stagnant feeling, or maybe that stuck feeling. So there's usually unsettledness, dissatisfaction could be another way. Either way, or another thing that I just thought of is like a stirring. So it's not always a negative. Sometimes it's a negative, but sometimes it's like this stirring, like there's something more, like in the Barbie movie, What Was I Made For? That song. Anyway, but there's that stirring. But either way, they're on this trajectory, a ramp up, if you will, to a major transition in their life. And oh my word, do I love to be right there with them in that because it's just so energizing. It's so beautiful. They don't always see it that way. As a matter of fact, they usually don't see it that way. It looks scary. It's a little bit anxiety provoking. All of those things put me in. I love it. So that's where I would say I could see myself. Or maybe they're in the middle of the transition and they truly just are trying to think like what steps should they take next and in what order. And that's where that strategy piece comes in. And that's what I can bring to the table. So I love thinking long-term strategy and all of that. So anyway, that's kind of one of those people groups, I guess, that I can see. I love the transition thing too, because I have the ability to just like, I know what it can become. I can see it. I could see it for you. And so if you don't have the energy to see it for yourself, or if you don't have the capacity or the capability to see it for yourself, trust me, I can see it so perfectly clear. So anyway, I love that. Okay, so that's one group, people group, I guess. Another people group that is just feels like it's out there a little bit is somebody who wants to start something. So oftentimes I love being around entrepreneurs or people who are just in those beginning stages. And I'm not talking like the multi-million dollar entrepreneur, investor kind of an entrepreneur. I'm talking about like just your everyday person who's like, I've been thinking, what if I did this? Or what if I started this? Or, I just thought of a recent example where somebody was like, somebody asked me if I'd be interested in like cleaning their house, but I would just do it on Saturday mornings because I already work my 9 to 5 job. And so I thought I would pick up some extra money, but I actually really love it. I'm like, oh, tell me more. Like, how much do you love it? What do you love about it? Because to me, I'm like, oh, that's the beginning stages. That's how it happens a lot of times with entrepreneurship. Or, a lot of times it'll come out of a frustration or a problem. And they're like, I just wish there was something like fill in the blank. And I see that as like, oh, it sounds like there's something maybe stirring inside of you that you could start. Maybe you have to start the very thing that you are longing for. So, anyway, somebody who's potentially thinking about entrepreneurship, or maybe they've got that entrepreneurial spirit or drive inside of them. Oh, I love it so much. So that's kind of a theme or a thread of people that I can see. Another category that is genuinely like kind of out there, except it's right involved, is people in a marriage. So my husband and I have been married for 19 years, and we both just have this deep passion to really come alongside people in marriages, whether that's in pre-marriage counseling or that's during their marriage, or whether it's honestly, a lot of times what it comes down to is normalizing things that are in marriage. So we just have such a passion to help people who are right in the middle of living that out or experiencing that. Okay, so that's another thing. The other thing that I love, or people who I can feel drawn to, are people who have walked through wild, incredibly difficult past experiences on all sorts of levels. So whether that is trauma or extreme difficulty or like something that built up this need for resilience, like whatever that is, but somebody who has walked through something really difficult in their past, but they're ready to actually move forward into their future. They're just not sure how. Oh my goodness gracious, do I love that. So that's another group that. And then another thing is I genuinely do love all things leadership, teams, organizational health, etc. I think sometimes it does for me come down to strategy. It comes down to vision, mission, values, all of that kind of stuff. Is where I love like dreaming big and thinking about it. And often I have thought that I'm going to use some of the corporate stuff that I have learned and really make it personal. So, um, the other thing that I wrote down was this is very me. This is in my real life. This is really how I am. And if I'm very transparent, which, talking to the world, so why not? Here's what I would say. I've actually had to learn to kind of calm this part of me down. I'm not shutting it off. I'm not saying it's not there. I'm just simply saying, I want to calm this part of me down. And I've done that over the last couple of years. And how I have still been able to activate this gift that I have is by asking permission before I just assume that someone would want this thing from me. But it's this idea who, like people who I'm drawn to or drawn to me often are people who just need a little bit of a push. And I think about it like, go on, little birdie. I've said that phrase so many times, which might feel demeaning to somebody, but I never mean it that way. It's like, go on, you can fly, you got this, push, push, and kind of like push them out the nest a little bit. And I think people can handle way more than they give themselves credit for. And if I'm there saying, I know you got this, and there's safety nets and all of those sorts of things, I'm more than happy to be the person to push them out of the nest. So I love working with people who need that little bit of a push. The other category of people who are usually drawn to me or I'm drawn to also, and it's really an opposite version of myself, which is what I love so much. It's the people who they often say, like, I love how you're such an activator. That's a lot of the things that people say to me. They'll say, like, you're just such an activator. You get stuff done, you move forward on things. And so oftentimes people who feel like they can't do those things, or for whatever reason, maybe they don't have the energy or the capacity, or they don't know how, or what, it doesn't matter the reason why, but they'll often say, like, I'm just going to ride your wave of energy, of action and all of that, which I love. I'm like, yep, that sounds great. I don't mind to do that. That's amazing and all of that. So anyway, this video, this idea of me like just actually talking out, what do I even want to do? What do I want to talk about on the video? Who do I want to reach? What is this niche audience going to look like? All of those sorts of things. This needed to be a place today for me to verbalize and say out loud. Well, it's no wonder that I have a hard time defining. One, I'm an includer, as we talked about on the Strength Finders. And two, I genuinely love like that idea of Barbie where it's like, well, I can be this and I can be this and I can do this and I can show up here and I can do that. All of it. I love it so, so, so much. I think it just feeds my soul. I resonate so much with that messaging. And yet what I have come to realize, and I'll close with this, is that at the end of the day, a couple of years ago, I felt like I struck gold with understanding really what my mission in life. So if I had a mission statement, it would be to instill courage in others to go, be, and do. And I have a picture of that. Some really great friends put it in some artwork for me. I know for a fact that that is what I am put on this earth to do, is to instill courage in others to go, be, and do. I realized that I had gotten the main mission statement basically for my life, but it's still being colored in. So, and that's beautiful. And I want to give room to that. I don't want to just be so locked in that this is what I was supposed to do. It's instill courage in others to go be and do. And yes, that's 100% true. And when I started paying attention, what I realized is that that word of transition that I talked about earlier, and this idea of activation that I've also talked about, it's this helping people go through things so that they can be who they're supposed to be and do what they're supposed to do. See, for a long time, I thought it was just to instill courage in others to go be and do, like for them to go. But what I realized is actually, no, it has nothing to do with that. It's helping instilling courage in others to go through the things they need to go through so they can become who they're supposed to be and do what they're supposed to do. And sometimes people just need a little bit of courage. They just need a little bit of somebody coming alongside of them and saying, like, whatever courage might look like for them at that moment. And that is what I know for sure I was put on the earth to do. So, kind of making this full circle, that idea, that mission statement to instill courage in others to go through things they're supposed to go through, to be who they're supposed to be and do what they're supposed to do, that mission statement has felt like it has 1 million different expressions. And so that's where people would say, like, oh, you've done this and you've done that. And it's, yeah, but at the core of all of it, it's been a matter of helping other people realize that they have what it takes to go through what they need to go through in order to go to be and do. And my part in it is instilling courage in them. So even in photography, I'll talk about this later. I don't want to get into this right now, but even in when I have done photography, I've done a lot of birth photography. I've been in I don't know how many birth rooms at this point. What I love with every fiber of my being in that room is, one, that person is going through something they have to go through in order to be and do the things, etc. But the instilling courage part for them is me being in the room, encouraging them, but also telling and documenting their story so that at the end of the experience, they can look back on those photographs and recognize that they have way more strength and way more capabilities than they've ever given themselves credit for. So even birth photography, that expression of my mission really ultimately comes down to continuing to instill courage in those people to go through things they go through so that they can be and do. Anyway, I am loving this challenge. Like, I feel like I'm a better human being. I went to coffee with a friend this morning and I was like, I feel lighter. Like, I feel energized because I'm finally letting all this stuff metabolize. I'm finally doing something with it. So I would encourage you, maybe you're like me and you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing or who I'm supposed to be or who I'm supposed to be talking to, and you just feel a little chaotic. I'm with you. I got this. We're in this together. We're going to figure this out together. And I know that this is the next straight step for us. So I'm cheering for you. And I'm super proud of us for going through this process together. So anyway, thanks for listening. I can't believe we did it. We did it. Video number 3.